And hello, I'm with Michael Cleavely today from CoComply. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Ian. How are you, sir?
Yeah, it's been a while since I caught up with you.
It has. It has. How's everything going?
All good, all good. Listen, can you, for the audience that we've got on this program, can you tell me a bit about how you got involved in IR35 and compliance?
Oh, what an exciting story to kick off with. No, I've been in the workforce sector in some capacity for about 20 years, Ian. So fairly long in the tooth, and have been in kind of different types of roles and functions within that. I've had a startup business, been involved with a large PLC. I've worked for mid-sized companies as well early in my career, and really the involvement in R35 came about. There's a bit of a grey area, but really kind of in about 2020, around 2020.
Yeah.
And I was working on a technology consultancy business which deployed contractors to deliver outcome-based projects within sort of cloud engineering and IM and whatnot. So it's a fairly standard contractor type consulting model, SOW model. But we started coming across kind of numerous issues and having various conversations with procurement managers and HR and tech leaders about IR35 and the changes that the legislation was going to have and how it was going to impact them. What that led to was my brain, if you like, looking at this scenario and really understanding why it was a problem for businesses, and especially those that need to solve the problem at scale. If you like, so ones that have lots of different contractors, lots of different departments, lots of different really big organisations or public sector bodies. So I became quite deeply interested in it and realised what a large issue it was. I then realised the size of the global challenge that worker classification, which is the lesser known term used to describe R35, was presenting to businesses. I became acutely aware of the impact it was having on our highly valued contractor and consultant population. Got some really, really highly skilled individuals in the UK market. And when the legislation changed around R35 to put the onus on the company, about 20% of them moved abroad to work because of the impact of the legislation. There was no solution out there for it. I believe there was 10 or 12% couldn't find work. We're in contract, they're in contract and really struggling. So that's a big, there's 4.3 million self-employed in the UK. So that's a big chunk of people that were impacted by this, and that's before we even get onto the companies themselves. So that piqued my interest, and sort of CoComply evolved from that baseline, and that's sort of how I got into it, and we've come on some journey since.
So I mean, with IR35, is the impact on the contractor? Is it on the company?
So the impact is on both. Right. But the requirement to be compliant sits with the company. There's some nuances to that. I won't go into that and bore your listeners with the finer details today. Things like if you're a small business, it doesn't apply to you at this stage. So there's some nuances, but that's the general takeaway, is that the client for whom the contractor is working now has responsibility to correctly classify the engagement in which the contractor is providing the services.
And isn't there a I guess, if you do your contracting properly, if you're working through statement of works, for example, does this go away anyway, or is it still a problem?
Oh no, it's a problem, and it's very complex, and we've seen quite a lot of organisations trying to use statement of work as either a channel to sort of slightly avoid compliance, because most large companies have some sort of form of control on this via their talent channel. So you get consultants and contractors going via the procurement sort of SOW type channel in a way to say IR35 doesn't apply. That's not the case. It depends on the setup. And even if you are working through those channels, not only does, and you're a contractor or consultant, not only does IR35 apply, but actually correctly structuring everything from the engagement to the contracts and statements of work, it isn't massively straightforward. Now, it's like any business process, Ian. Once you've got the structure and got the framework and you've got the subject matter knowledge, either in-house or with your partner or however you do it, once you get it there, you can really leverage the contractor community to save money, to drive better outputs, and whilst remaining compliant. So there's huge upside to it, but there's just a general lack of real deep knowledge on how to do that in the UK market at the moment, and that's why the kind of SOW thing doesn't. Sorry, go on.
No, I'm going to ask the question on the back of that. I mean, I know that if you go into the detail of IR35, explaining what it is and how it works can be quite confusing. But with these recent sort of last few years and the changes that have happened over that time, what has the impact been, Michael, of those changes?
Well, aside from the impact on contractors and the difficulties that they have in terms of the impact on the actual work available to contractors who want to work outside IR35 in most instances, especially if they're specialists. The impact on organisation has been quite a significant uplifting cost to police this, to manage this compliantly, or if they've taken a very risk-averse approach and blanket ban contractors, then they've had the cost of the uplift in putting contractors that could be legitimately working outside IR35 onto payroll. That cost, when you break that down for a supply chain, there's a lot of hidden costs in there that organisations are not aware of until we sort of go through it with them. And the average is kind of 65-75% uplift in costs.
Wow.
It's huge. And there's various levels in the supply chain of why those costs get levied and therefore cause the uplift. So it's had a really big impact. But then the positive side of it is those companies that have managed to do it compliantly and do it in the right way are now a hotbed for attracting talent. The best contractors want to go and work for these companies that have compliant processes, can engage them legitimately outside IR35. And even the flip side of that, contractors that are in an engagement that should be classed as inside IR35. Okay, it comes at a greater cost to the company, but if they are working with a capacity employee, they're due under certain circumstances a variety of benefits and protections that they should get. So there's the flip side of that as well. So it's had a really sizable impact on organisations and contractors themselves.
And in terms of the roles that are affected by this, I mean, I think one of the challenges always with talent and staffing is you've got HR's often involved, procurement's involved, you've got legal teams involved. Where does the buck stop here? And should, if you are an HR leader or if you're a procurement leader, should you be bothered about this yourself?
So to answer your first question, where does the buck stop? I mean, there's no straight answer, but there is a straight answer. Just based on experience, it depends on who the organisation decides the main stakeholder should be. In my experience, it nearly always falls on HR, rightly or wrongly. It is complex because you've hit the nail on the head. It's highly nuanced. It's multi-jurisdictional. It straddles tax, HR, procurement, legal, as you've just pointed out. And when you're going through a kind of onboarding process or a procurement process with the client, when we go through that to provide our services to them, we often have to speak to all those different departments. But the broad situation is in most companies, it does, unfortunately for HR leaders, sort of fall into their wheelhouse, as they say.
Yeah, and in your experience, Michael, of the market so far, I know this is very peculiar to the UK at the moment, although there are similar kind of schemes obviously going on in different countries. But in the UK, what is the state of play in the market? How well has this been dealt with by organisations? What's your experience?
That's a fantastic question, and my answer would be mixed. Some organisations have dealt with it really well; they've really embraced it, and they're really enjoying the benefits of it now. They are finding it easier than they did from sort of pre-IR35 to engage and to find talented contractors. Just quite frankly, because there's a little less competition. I wouldn't say that impact has been has been sort of a seismic impact, but it's been noticeable in the organisations that have really got their processes in aligned. And other organisations have, as I mentioned earlier, taken a really risk-averse approach, which I'm not sure they quite all realise the cost associated with that, and the vacuum of talent that is impacting them. I'm sure some of them do, but I'm not sure they all do. So it's been a really mixed bag. What I would say is organisations at the moment, for two reasons, have started to get a lot better at it. In fact, there's probably three reasons. One being the new tax offset that's coming to play very shortly, which reduces the risk of misclassification and the fines, the tax liability involved in that can be levied against an organisation. So companies have started to recognise that the risk isn't quite as huge as it was before. It's still big enough to not want to get this wrong for a whole host of reasons, not just money. Well, that's one reason. Secondly, organisations are starting to get more mature and starting to realise that it can be managed effectively. And I think that's a bit of a natural process where for private companies in April 21, the first 1 or 2 years, especially because we were post-COVID and all the other sort of geopolitical issues that were going on, I think post-COVID, they sort of stuck a plaster on it for a bit. They sort of just went, we're not going to take outside IR35 contractors, or we're only going to engage certain contractors in that capacity. And they kind of didn't really deal with it. They just sort of did the best that they could. And I think that's starting to change. That's starting to change as well. So there's been the companies are getting better. Companies are getting more open to it. The tax offset's definitely gonna help as well. Yeah.
Now, tell me, in terms of risk mitigation for this, what does CoComply do? What does your service do to reduce those risks?
So CoComply is a cost-effective, scalable a SaaS solution that helps organisations manage worker classification at scale. So it helps organisations correctly, accurately, and fairly classify their workers very, very quickly, and therefore reduce risk and make sure that the contractor is engaged in the right way. We do that through two methods. Obviously, as I've just said, we've got a SaaS platform that we use, but also it's underpinned by human expertise. So organisations that are dealing with this quite complex issue, it's not just use our platform. There's someone there that's helping them, guiding them. So we do some assessments on a face-to-face basis and some assessments digitally. So we get that blend right. So we're upskilling and increasing organisation maturity whilst making sure that they can get the results they want very quickly.
Right. And what size of businesses tending to use your service, Michael?
A real blend. We've got clients that have anything from a fairly small population of sort of 2, 3, 5, 10 contractors, right up to organisations that have got hundreds of contractors in situ at the moment. So we deal with a whole host. You find that the smaller customers want a really simplistic, non-invasive solution. They just want to make sure that they are accurately classifying, and where they've not got the right framework in place, we're helping them to get that in place so they kind of know what an outside IR35 engagement looks like. They know what an inside IR35 engagement looks like, and right at the beginning, before they even go to market, they can make sure it's structured in the right way. So it leaves much less room for ambiguity, confusion, and frustration further down the line. The larger enterprise organisations look for a bit more of an embedded process, typically, where they're working very closely with each other. We do it at scale, and that might be from engagement, sort of what we call engagement engineering, making sure that the engagements are all pulled in the right place and they're structured in the right way, to helping upskill their teams through sort of some face-to-face assessments. So organisations might have a preference to do face-to-face assessments initially, so that we're upskilling the contractor and the line manager, and then as the organisation matures, it becomes less necessary to do that. So we're sort of taking them on a bit of a journey.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the other kind of critical bit is the ongoing management of compliance. So the regular check-ins, the evidence gathering, which supports any HMRC investigation and allows organisations to deliver the metrics that HMRC ask for when they want to audit the company very quickly.
Yeah, now there are HMRC letters dropping on people's doorsteps at the moment around this. I know, and I mean, should have the thought that happens, because it sounds horrid. But what is the most likely areas of risk that the HMRC are going to be prodding around on with this? To what should you be worried about?
Organisational knowledge and maturity, consistency in approach as well, making sure in large organisations you've actually identified and understand what HMRC constitutes to be a contractor and comes in scope of the legislation.
Yeah.
And making sure that you're able to report back on that data. So how many are inside IR35, how many are outside IR35, how many constitute what's known as a fully outsourced service. So there's quite a few questions, and sort of led me down. I've led myself down a bit of a path there into getting into a bit of detail. But I guess the main thing is to sort of know your numbers, make sure the process is robust, make sure it's consistent, and make sure you're able to respond quickly to HMRC to give them confidence that you're taking what's known as reasonable care, and you've taken the time and put in the effort in order to make sure that this is a robust, consistent process.
So basically, if you've got your letter and you've not done anything about this at the moment, that's a problem, really, isn't it? You need to get ahead of the game, I suppose, before the thing lands on your desk.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing, I think most business leaders would probably agree the best thing to do is to be in a position that when the letter lands on your desk, you are prepared, because you typically get 30 days to respond. You can request an extension, but that will naturally raise a red flag. And it's, of course, completely subjective, Ian, in terms of timescales, but getting all of this in place and simplified can take, it can take a good few months. In large organisations, it can take up to a year.
Wow.
But once it's in place, it just depends on maturity, access to data and systems and whatnot. But once it's in place, it streamlines everything and keeps everything much cleaner across the organisation. So you know how many contractors you're working with, you know how many, as I said, are off payroll or on payroll, what your associated costs are, how much money you've potentially saved by having a compliant program. Those are all reportable situations up to board level. So there's a huge amount of benefit in doing it properly that I think organisations are starting to realise and catch on to, not to mention access to better talent. But it's a case of just getting started, not waiting for that letter to drop on the door, realising that there's benefits at the end of the rainbow, as well as just being able to respond to HMRC. Yeah,
and I guess for many business leaders or department leaders, that they're going to be most concerned about making sure they've got the base covered to a level, at least, to risk mitigate. Is there some form of kind of assessment or something that they can do to work out what level of risk they're facing at the moment?
Yeah, you can do a very, a very basic kind of discovery exercise can almost be done, for want of a better term, on the back of a fact packet. You can sort of sit down and say, the first conversation we have with larger organisations or bodies, they don't tend to have all the data there, but they might have some indicative data. And if they've got some indicative data, we're able to sort of very quickly give them at least a half-painted picture of where we feel like they are, and then we can take things from there and sort of colour the rest in as we go, so to speak. I think it's important. I think that initial sort of phased discovery can almost help you get senior level board buy-in into the issue if you haven't already, but also start to really shape, well, hang on, how much could we save here? How much, what cost benefit is there in order to do this? And saving money is, to most organisations, it's not as sexy as making money, but it's probably the second most sexy thing a company can do, right?
Now we're running out of time, but I wanted to just get one last question into you, and that is, if you are a procurement officer or an HR leader, and you're in this difficult situation that nobody's really picked this up, but you know the likelihood is it's going to fall on you. What advice would you give to them? What can they do?
If on the assumption that they don't have subject matter expertise, they should get in contact with a partner such as CoComply. I'll caveat by saying there are other suppliers on the market. Not to drop your not to drop into much a lead into your podcast. But yeah, they should speak to a partner and just get a bit of a steer. And most companies will be able to, in kind of an hour phone call, start to give them some basics to start looking at and start thinking about. And that's probably the best thing to do is just get started. Just start learning what are the steps you need to take, and then as quickly as you can start getting those blocks and those steps taken. So you're sort of working towards a really good framework. And as I said, once it's in place, it's in place.
Good to know. Michael, we're out of time. Thanks very much for your time today. Thanks for coming on the programme.
Cheers. No problem, Ian.